Rory Gilmore is one of those characters that has an unfortunate case of fumbling many things, such as the hopes and the hearts of her fanbase for over 20 years. So much so, we still make video essays about her today. She's a forever trending topic, and I applaud the writers for that. So I wanted to start this video by giving her some words of encouragement and positive reinforcement, but I remembered that she is a fictional character and that none of this really matters, so I guess I'll get straight into it. For many years, there's been talk about Rory's actions in the show and whether or not she should be deemed as a good person. Yes, she is a cheater. Yes, she's a bit rude. Yes, she should get her act together. But she's a 40-year-old teenage girl just trying to find her way. In my personal opinion, my biggest bone I've had to pick with Rory is the fact that she's had several opportunities to infiltrate the rich and had done everything in her power to not utilize a single resource correctly. In simpler terms, Rory Gilmore is a professional bag fumbler, which is single-handedly the biggest crime she's ever committed to me. So let's get into that. Throughout the series, Rory Gilmore is portrayed as a really smart kid. Not a genius, not a brainiac, but insanely book smart. She's told she can do great things and has a bright future ahead of her, and she believes it because why wouldn't she? And then she finally gets a wake-up call when she sees what the wealthy side of her family has to offer, starting with Chilton Prep School. And with great ambition comes great competition. And while I appreciate Rory's way of going about things the honest way, I think the show symbolized the power of class connections and communication, all of which Rory had access to but managed very, very poorly. In Chilton, Rory is faced with spoiled trust funders and is no longer seen as a gem in the education field. In fact, she's actually seen as an average kid compared to the big names at Chilton for some time in the show. Once again, not a brainiac nor a genius, just Rory. And the students that gave her the hardest time are also the ones who gave her legitimate life lessons on how to navigate the world of the young and rich, being that it's all they've ever known, as well as the red flags of growing up in such conditions. The first instance that stood out to me was Season 1, Episode 6, which is Rory's 16th birthday. As Rory tries to find a way to navigate her Chilton crowd, which she presumably has no real interest in, along with her Stars Hollow crowd, she realizes she has to be interchangeable in both settings. But Rory, however, isn't quite comfortable with that yet, seeing as she wasn't on good terms with her peers until later on in the show. And I can understand Rory's frustration with having to go along with that, especially when she wasn't really even given a heads up about the party happening until the invites were already given, and the party was hosted by her grandparents, Richard and Emily. But looking at this now as an adult, this was definitely a tactic used for the sake of keeping your enemies close. Local participation in the community was something Emily strongly pushed for Lorelai and Rory, and as a viewer, we assumed it was something she just enjoyed doing in her past time. But later on in the series, we realized that not even Emily was fond of her peers, nor was she ever. It was all a quiet game that Emily was willing to play. Rory, however, rejects this notion, which is once again understandable, but she still never quite finds a balance. As the show goes on, she either wants nothing to do with the wealthy lifestyle or dives completely into it, but even then, she still rejects the idea of any possible advantages she carries because of it. And it really makes sense as to why people started to get annoyed with her around this time. College-era Rory was always at a 10 and needed intense humbling. This is true. And not only did it frustrate the audience, it also frustrates her rich counterparts because although they know a lot of things in life were handed to them, they don't act like the money or connections had nothing to do with it. Rory knew the entire point of getting into Chilton was to better her chances at getting into Harvard. Rory also knew that being a Gilmore would better her chances at getting into Yale. She also knew that she had more than enough confidence that if she had just did things by the book, she'd make it in either school just fine. And Rory obviously had her moments of falling into peer pressure. She could typically use her own discernment of what it means to work smarter and not harder. But the question is, did she typically do it? No, I don't think so. With nearly every opportunity at furthering her chances through her connections, she would not only hesitate, but saw it as a handout, still fearing the thought of being a traitor to the underprivileged, which she was not. Rory's end goal was pretty clear. She wanted nothing more than to become a journalist, and she was willing to tell anyone that asked about it. I knew it, the audience knew it, Stars Hollow knew it, everyone knew it. So why on earth was the execution of her journey portrayed so badly? We didn't really have any plots talking about Rory's drive to write things. Yes, she worked for newspapers and was applauded for some of her pieces and made some memorable speeches, but boy did they drop the ball on not giving her the existential college essay crisis plotline. Practically every teen sitcom has one. All in all, I wish we had seen more of Rory's writing chops, because then we wouldn't have viewers today still question whether or not she was good at it in the first place. Now, if it's one thing we know about this show, it's that people are going to talk quickly. And seeing as Rory was the Gilmore that was supposed to rewrite a lot of generational wrongs, I'm sure that was something that once again put her at crossroads, especially since she was first and foremost seeking the approval of Lorelai before anyone else. So much so that I'd argue that we leave her character most times not really understanding how she truly feels about most situations. And as much as I love Lorelai's laid-back approach for parenthood, I do strongly wish she had given Rory more guidance into the world that she chose to leave behind herself. And if there was the off chance that Rory and Lorelai weren't speaking, Rory would ultimately just hide behind her books or a relationship. I know a lot of it was clearly because she wanted Rory to make her own decisions and make her own mistakes, but I also just felt like Lorelai had too much built-up resentment about her own experiences with her former peers that she blocked that part out from her life completely. And it is with great reason, of course, but she kind of threw Rory in the deep end to figure things out on her own. Maybe Rory wouldn't have listened, but it would have been nice to see her try a bit more. It's also pretty clear to most watchers that Rory was heavily introverted and kept a lot of things bottled up, which would cause the occasional outburst that no one saw coming, which I think just resulted in the viewers being more iffy about her and her goals. When she was good, she was great. When she was bad, she would flounder. The older Rory got, the more unsatisfied she was as a person, especially in the Netflix's Year in the Life special. On one hand, I think it was incredibly normal for her to have imposter syndrome at certain stages of her life. But to see her still have such a gap in her resume, it makes me wish she had just picked another profession entirely. Oftentimes, when the topic of nepotism comes in, those who have connections are critiqued more harshly, obviously. And sometimes the one who are well acquainted beat the odds and prove that they do in fact have something more to offer. And I can honestly say, I don't know if Rory had anything to offer. The character of Rory has influenced many young people throughout the show's run, and so on. She's also someone a lot of us have sought out to be like when it came to following one's dreams. But I also think of her as a cautionary tale of moderation. The world of the wealthy wasn't exactly something Rory grew up with. It was a newfound source and an environment that she either shied away from or fell so deeply into that she forgot about the things that actually mattered. If you had the chance to better your odds at life with a single favor, would you take it? Even if the challenges, the criticisms of ethics or morals, would the average human still give it a go? It's a question that most can answer almost immediately without giving it a second thought. For others, it pushes the social impact of guilt, biasness, and the infamous undeserving to the forefront of the conversation. And that conversation could go on for a very, very long time.